Good day, teacher. I hope you are doing well today. In this opportunity, I'm going to talk about the varieties of French dialects. But before starting to this topic, I would like to remember some important topic or important aspect with this language. That is that the French language was not the main language of communication in France until the last 2 centuries. It became the language of the state only during the rule of Napoleon. However, before that, French became the main language in this country, in France as well. There was those 4 dialects that were very used and common in this dialect. For example, the first one is Picker-Wallon, the other one is Champigny, the other one is Norman and Meridional. Talking about Picker-Wallon, it was considered as the main dialect of the northern regions of France, and Meridional. This dialect is highly influenced by all features of the Occitan language that include but are not limited to morphology, syntax, vocabulary, and morphology. A part of those dialects that were used before the establishment of the French language, nowadays there are another varieties of French found in France. For example, this is one of them, that is the standard French dialect that is better known as Metropolitan French or French. Now, how we can know, or how we can in our mind, French is the native language of the majority of population of France. Apart from France, there are several other countries where we can find French speakers. One of them is, for example, Canada. So, talking about Canadian French, this dialect or this variation exists in Canada since the 7th century. Today, around 7 million people in Canada speak Canadian French dialects as their priority language. These major populations are settled in the provinces that include Quebec, Ontario, New Brunswick, Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. However, the main concentration of population who speak this dialect or this language in Canada is Quebec. This province has the 80% of population talking in this language. Talking about the rest of cities or provinces, the percentage is around the 2% of population talking this language in Canada. In addition, in this country and those provinces, there are more French dialects that are important and better known nowadays. One of them, for example, is the Acadian French dialect. The other one is Newfoundland French dialect, the Quebec French dialect, and Memphis French dialect. Talking about one of the important dialects in this aspect is the Acadian French dialect. What happened with that? The Acadian was a tribe that arrived to Canada, and they established their main vocabulary, pronunciation, and important aspects of the language, and they have an important population who speaks this dialect that is very different or a little bit different from the standard French, that is the metropolitan, or better known as French that is spoke in France. those dialects are different. And for example, an important aspect of that is in Canada, for example, company who needs to translate documents or something related to something important needs to translate the documents to the Canadian, or in this case Acadian or Canadian French, because it's very different to the Metropolitan or Standard French. So it is important to know that this French is better used this is better used in government, schools, and all the important departments in Canada. So here is not common to use the Standard French because are very different. It is important to mention that. Talking about another variety of dialect is the American French dialect. In America, there are over 2 million French speakers. The higher concentration of French-speaking people is in the state of Louisiana, which had been a French colony in the 17th century. What happened here? Do you remember the Acadian tribes? Well, they went to the United States because they were deported from Canada, and they arrived to Louisiana and settled in this state. And of course they arrived, the dialect, the pronunciation, the vocabulary, and all the important aspects of the language, and decide to continue with this in this state. For this reason, the state of Louisiana is the main state of of the United States where the French language is speak. However, in this American French dialect, there are another important variation of the language. For example, the Cajun French dialect is one of them, the Napoleonic French and the Colonial French. What happened with this? That is one of the most important dialect of the state of Louisiana. In this state, apart to the arrival of the Acadian tribes, arrived another important people from French, directly from French, who spoke the standard or metropolitan French. So these combinations between Acadian French and metropolitan or standard French made the creation of this new dialect that is the Cajun. So this is a combination of those two important dialects. The colonial French is not very used nowadays, so the main dialect talking in the United States, specifically in Louisiana State, is the Cajun French. Now, talking about another important variety of French language is the African French dialects. In this case, there are more than 100 million French-speaking people in Africa who speak French, either as a primary or secondary language. So, there are three important aspects in this topic. One of them is the one spoken by the Arabs and Berbers, mostly in the northwest region of Africa. Some call this as the Maghreb dialect. The other is spoken in eastern and central regions of Africa. And finally, is spoken in countries like Mauritius and Seychelles. So there are, in this case, for those African French dialect, are very different from each others, mainly in terms of vocabulary and pronunciation. The pronunciation are more influenced by those of the local African language. So for they, although they have the main aspects of the French language, they create his or their own dialects. So for this reason are very different, are not easy, is very different, and it's not easy to understand these African French dialect for people who live, for example, in France, because the standard metropolitan French is very very different to the African French dialect. In this case, a part of those dialects that I mentioned before is the Belgian French that is compared to a standard French. The Belgian French dialect has distinctive and prominent variation in pronunciation as compared to the standard French dialect. It is another important variety of the French dialects. So, in order to remember which are the different varieties, so we have the mainly, that is the used before to the standardization of the French language, that is speaker Ballon, Champenois, Norman, and Meridional, Standard French, Canadian French. Between the Canadian French, we can found Acadian, Newfoundland, Quebec, Métis, the American French, and the African French. So that's all for today. I hope you will find interesting this presentation, and thank you for watching this video.